Hi, my name is Steve Klein. I'm the Chief Data Officer at Gardner Intelligence, and I'm here to talk to you about some results from a survey we've been doing since the beginning of March about manufacturers and how they are dealing with everything that's going on about coronavirus and COVID-19. And the survey started with two pretty simple questions. What changes has your business experienced, and what adjustments have you made as a result of COVID-19? And so we've been asking those two basic questions for 5 weeks now. And we also ask manufacturers about the severity of those changes and the impacts that we're making. So I want to talk to you today about the results from the survey from the week of March 30th. And first, let's talk about the changes experienced by manufacturers. Notice that in the fifth week of the survey, ripple effects were the largest change experienced. Now, these are effects that manufacturers are experiencing, but they can't specifically tie them to COVID-19, but they know something is different about their business. Almost 50% of manufacturers are experiencing that. But notice that it's a relatively small change from the previous week. So when we look at this chart, the green dots are the current week, the week of March 30th, and the gray dots are the previous week, so the week of March 23rd. One other thing we notice in looking at the changes experienced by businesses is that there isn't a lot of change from the last couple of weeks, that manufacturers are still experiencing similar conditions compared to the normal of a little more than a month ago. This tells me that manufacturers are starting to adjust to quote unquote the new normal that they're experiencing during this global pandemic. Now, if we can look at the severity of these changes, here we're looking at the bars represent the current week, the severity of those changes, whether it was a minimal impact, a moderate impact, or a major impact. And then the gray hashes represent the previous week. So we can see whether the bar is beyond or further to the right of the gray hash, indicating more manufacturers were indicating that response, or to the left of it, or less than the gray hash, and fewer manufacturers were indicating that response. And when we look at this chart, what we see is that the major impact, the darker orange line there, the bar, is less than the previous week in every single case. So the severity of the impact of these changes that manufacturers are experiencing has lessened or decreased from the previous week. And in almost every case, we're moving from less of a major impact to more of a moderate impact. And again, this is telling me that manufacturers are starting to adjust or are getting used to these experiences that they're dealing with related to COVID-19. Now, we also looked at adjustments that businesses are making. So instead of things happening to the manufacturer, what adjustments are the manufacturers making in response to the coronavirus? And travel, of course, is near the top and has been at the top since we started the survey 5 weeks ago. Travel and also trade show attendance and participation, which is largely driven by travel as well. Those are some of the more significant adjustments that businesses have made. But in this fifth week, we saw a significant increase in budgets and spending, the number of manufacturers making adjustments there. And more than 50% of manufacturers have started to adjust their budgets and their spending. And notice as we move down this chart that they're also making adjustments to hiring and recruiting and staffing and headcount. And while it's a lot farther down the list, there has been a significant increase in the percentage of manufacturers in this fifth week making adjustments to compensation. And so what we see is that manufacturers are making more adjustments to who and how they're getting their work done, the amount of people involved, and that sort of thing, but not as much adjustments being made relative to their production and their capacity and the lead time and the supply chain. Yes, those things are being adjusted, but not as much as the budgets and the people involved in getting the work done. Now, if we look at the severity of adjustments that are being made by manufacturers. We see something similar to the severity of the changes in experience that manufacturers are having, and that in most of these cases, the adjustments are becoming less severe. Maybe not as much as in the experiences that manufacturers are having, but we're still seeing less severe adjustments, and the severity of the impact is moving from major to moderate in terms of the adjustment. And again, this is telling me that manufacturers are sort of getting used to this new normal environment as we get deeper into the process of dealing with it. The one notable exception to that is regarding the staffing and the headcount, which has become just very slightly more severe, more of a major impact, because manufacturers are still trying to keep the production levels up, keep the supply chain moving, but doing it with fewer people in the manufacturing facility. So those are really the highlights of how manufacturers are dealing with the experiences, the changes that they're experiencing, and the adjustments that they're making. And we've also added a few questions over the last couple weeks about hours, operating hours, staffing, and the medical industry. And just to give you a quick update on those, almost 50% of manufacturing facilities are still operating at normal hours. So while COVID-19 has had a significant impact, it may be less than what we're quite thinking so far. And actually 5% of manufacturers are operating on extended hours at this point. And presumably those manufacturers are serving the medical industry and trying to get supplies and equipment to hospitals and the medical people that are doing everything they can to treat coronavirus. In terms of staffing, we see that 35% of manufacturers are still operating with their normal staff. About 4% are operating with more than their normal staff, and then the remainder are on moderately or significantly reduced staff. So even those that are still open, their normal hours, they're operating on reduced staff. So they're trying to keep their workers separate, but still trying to get the production moving and operating at a normal production level. And then finally, I just want to mention the medical industry briefly, that about 10% of the respondents were serving the medical industry prior to COVID-19, but they have increased serving the medical industry since then. And about 2% have started serving the medical industry in the 5th week of the survey. Now, both of those percentages have doubled from the previous week. So just in this last week, the week of March 30th, a significant response from the manufacturing community in trying to serve the medical industry. And then we also asked, are you interested in serving the medical industry? And we had about 3% of manufacturing facilities that are now interested in serving the medical industry in just this 5th week of the survey in the week of March 30th. So that's just a very quick update on what we have regarding coronavirus and how it's affecting manufacturers around the country. You can see my latest blog post on this at gardnerintelligence.com, and it'll give you the full details and all the charts related to the survey. You can also find other information regarding our business index and how that is being impacted by COVID-19. So that'll be a great resource for you to keep up to date on the data of manufacturing and how it's being impacted by COVID-19.